Before we dive into setting up a rig in Modo, let's first take a look at the Modo interface. I would recommend that if you're new to Modo, please spend some time with the documentation before watching this tutorial. This lecture assumes that you're familiar with the Modo interface and the basic Modo tools. In this lecture, I will be discussing how to set up joints, inverse kinematic, custom tools, and how we'll create a keyframed animation. I will not be discussing how to bind geometry to joints. We'll save that for a future series. Rigging and animation in Modo take place in the Setup and Animate tabs. They have some overlapping functionality. For instance, you can see the time slider in both the Setup and Animate tabs, and you can also keyframe an item's channels in both interfaces. The interface in the Animate tab is designed to give you just a nice view of the animation and access to the time slider at the bottom. Just like in other interfaces, you can switch between cameras in the Animate tab. You can also see that there are a large number of buttons that give you easy access to animation functions. On the right side, you can see that I have the item list, and there are tabs within this that allow you to access the other panels, such as the item properties. I have this divided into two panels so that I can select an item from the item list, and the properties will appear just below the list. I have various goal items color-coded to make it easier to keep track of the various parts of the rig. The Setup tab also has a camera view, so I have access to the properties, item list, and other panels on the right side. And on the left side, I have a tool panel, which allows me to choose from various rigging tools, as well as the move, scale, rotate tools, other tools, and their respective options. And in the Setup tab, I also have access to the timeline, as well as the node editing workspace. I can make changes to the parts of the rig while I'm in the Setup tab, as I mentioned before. And I can set up keyframes and even animate an object while in the Setup tab. But one special feature of the Setup tab is the Setup mode. It's a little bit confusing, since there are three buttons named Setup here under the Setup tab. There are the Setup tools on the left, which gives us access to rigging tools such as joints and inverse kinematics. Then we have the overall Setup tab, which is the Setup rigging interface that I'm in now. And then we have Setup mode, that suspends the animation and allows us to make changes to the rig. In Setup mode, the perspective view changes to a lighter blue and a yellow border appears around the interface just to remind you that you're currently in Setup mode. This is important because animations will not play as long as Setup mode is turned on. Now if we compare this arrangement to Maya, Maya lets you do all the modeling, rigging, and animation in one interface. But you do need to switch between the menu sets in order to access the different tools. So the tabs in Modo are kind of analogous to Maya's menu sets. The item list in Modo is similar to the outliner in Maya, and the channel box in Maya is similar to the channel properties in Modo. So there are some similarities between those interfaces. Modo has a graph editor that you can access by choosing Animate Graph Editor. The graph editor allows you to select and edit keyframe values as well as the interpolation curve between keyframes. It's very similar to Maya's graph editor. In this lecture, I will take you through the process of setting up a simple tetrapod rig like this one. You'll see that in addition to the channel box, you can also keyframe specific channels of specific items using a custom channel set interface. This is a great organizational tool that makes it easier to access just the items you need and eliminates the need to hunt around in various interface and panels within Modo. For example, I have auto key activated, and you can see that when I select this rear foot goal and move it, the dot next to the channel in the channel set window is shaded red, indicating a keyframe. I can also change values numerically within the channel set, and I'll take you through the process of setting up a channel set like this later on in this lecture. We'll start the lecture with a discussion of how channels work in Modo. We'll look at how to create a joint hierarchy with some tips on the best way to place joints. We'll discuss inverse kinematics, IK goals, how to create custom selectable controls, such as this curve that controls the root of the skeleton. I'll show you how to organize the rig and its controls. I'll show you the various display options for the rig, and how to store poses for the rig. And then we'll finish up with a demonstration of how to create a looping walk cycle for this tetrapod rig. These fundamental techniques can be applied to more complex rigs, such as this jumping spider model. So in Chapter 2, we'll start with a discussion of animation basics in Modo.